Welcome back to the library, Wanderer. Today, we are back to a regular reading. Over to Library Wing 1, The Hidden Nest, over to King Shash's shelf. There, you spot yourself a book. It looks blue and futuristic. The cover says it's written by Marge Senteith. Ask the Universe Dad.
Are you sure we should kill it? People worship that damn thing.
Bullets and bombs can kill anything, Xander. Just do your job and we'll be fine.
I'm not asking if we can, I'm asking if we should. If we kill the deity of millions of people, there will be riots.
And if we don't, then it'll only be a matter of time before it shows its true colors. That thing is essentially omnipotent, and the risk involved in keeping it alive is too high to be entertained. General Duffy left the conversation there, turning down the corridor leading to the war room. This left Xander Sims alone in the main hallway of Parliament's War Department. He looked out the window. The usual view of the Earth and the stars were blocked by Dad's giant hand. His wristwatch, which functioned as a gigantic clock tower for the whole city, displayed that there was only 1.5 hours left of Xander's working day. He went down another corridor to his office. His office was comfortable enough, if a bit cramped. When the Judas operation had first been launched, the general had ordered for an entire floor of new offices to be constructed to accommodate the necessary influx of tacticians and scientists. Of course, the city's constant issue of restricted space came into effect, resulting in rows and rows of identical minuscule workspaces. Xander's job sounded simple enough. Shooting incredibly large bombs at a huge object was easy. Now give that object a splash of omnipotence, and killing it was now a whole lot more difficult. The first blow had to stun it, and the rest had to finish it off before it could resist. He, among other people, was in charge of dictating where the weapons would be hidden until their premiere. He finished off the remnants of the working day and took his coat off the door rack. Once he stepped outside, he was greeted by tight rows of identical dwellings, each with enough space to comfortably accommodate its inhabitants. The sidewalk was dotted with blue dad consultation booths. Without knowing why, Xander crossed the road to the nearest booth. Upon opening the door, he immediately felt at ease. The authorities had informed them that they were still unsure whether that effect was caused by psychic influence or some kind of vaporized drug, but there had been no evidence of Dad being able to read minds. A much smaller manifestation of Dad sat on one of the two stools, one leg crossed over the other. His face was clean-shaven and kind. He looked up from his newspaper. Xander! I don't see you here often. How are you?
I'm well.
If you were, you wouldn't be here. What do you need help with?
Say I had a decision. One side will ensure the safety of the human race. The other will risk danger, but also slow the progression of the city.
Dad's facial expression didn't change. He didn't try to ask for more information, instead saying, When I first created the universe, I flew through it, spreading life to its farthest corners. When I looked back at that trail I left behind me, I saw that most had torn themselves apart, and those that hadn't had fallen into wretchedness. Humanity was my success, but as a god, I believe that free will comes above all else. If you believe that it is the right thing to do it.
Thank you.
Xander rose and left. Dad watched him leave, and then turned back to his newspaper. People flocked to the war room. Remote ship pilots were already in place, ready for their signal. Xander was at his station in preparation for any changes that would need to be made to the plan of attack. The first drone detached itself from behind a nearby mune and drew closer behind Dad. It landed on his head and spontaneously erupted in a fountain of light. When the blaze faded, Dad was clutching his head, screaming silently. Fragments of bone and bubbles of blood were scattered several kilometers away. Swarms of frigates and drones flew towards him en masse. The drones latched on and detonated their loads, while the frigates peppered the Colossus with missiles and bombs. The smoke cleared, and there was Dad. He had been torn apart, bone and organs visible where the flesh had been destroyed. He looked dead for a second before he lunged towards the city. The onslaught began again, and just before he was blown into nothingness, his fingers grazed the outer dome covering the city. Xander's screen began to flash. He looked around and saw that all the other computers in the war room were also malfunctioning. Looking out of the window, the whole city grew into a quilt of dancing lights as every computer screen began flashing. Then, as quickly as it began, everything returned to normal, revealing that hundreds of thousands of petabytes of cultural and scientific information had been downloaded into the city's database. There was a blinking message on Xander's screen. There is always a time when a parent's children have to strike out on their own. The parent may not like this, but it is their responsibility to trust in their young, no matter what they choose to do. Good luck, humanity. That certainly was an interesting little read about what may be the future. But you have finished reading it, and as such, you move on to the next book. This appears to be written by the Deadly Moose. Introductory Notes of the Damned. This edition of the text is dictated by Jenkin Fairhead. Of the Damned is a 1344 text comprised of the number of works collected by an unknown male author, a Christian monk of the Basine tradition. It is unknown how the author gained access to most of the pieces collected in Of the Damned. In his personal letters, carefully hidden from his compatriots, he claims to have been on friendly terms with many of the authors, including some who appear to have died before his birth. Of the Damned purports to be a collection of stories and many of the notable denizens of hell, and is framed by a half-hearted Inferno-esque series of essays labeled Topology of Underworld. However, upon even a cursory reading of the text, it is clear that it is in reality a collection of rare texts created by this monk, framed in such a way that his Christian brethren would not object to the text's continued existence. This lends the book much of its value. It is the only surviving source of many texts deemed heretical, heathen, or satanic, and eradicated by Christians and Curians, Brotherhood zealots, in the so-called Dark Ages. See The Rose's Thorns and Brilliant Supremacy for further discussion of related religious activity during this time period. Two distinct versions of the book appear to have been originally created. One, the standard text, and two, the revised text, in which the author alters the text to conform to his moral standards. Notably, all historic or leadership figures of female, multiple, chthonic, or other genders are listed as male in the revised text. All lovers who are not heterosexual either have their genders changed or are transformed to relatives, typically to brothers or cousins. All instances of swearing on a deity's name are changed to obscure words considered by the author to be inoffensive, and all instances of reference to a created deity are changed to God. Key elements of many of the stories have also been altered. For instance, the act of sexual intercourse never takes place, leading to certain obvious inconsistencies, notably in the deluge passages of Son of Mine. The standard text does not appear to have been intended for wide dissemination, but meant to exist only in the author's personal collection. However, both versions were stolen and many sections extensively annotated by the thief, who appears to have also been a scholar, and who also spread many copies of both versions of the text amongst her community, and significantly expanded the original with additions of her own.
Other annotations have been made throughout the centuries, some by unknown personages, and some by scholars as great as Sinash and Grace Plutarch III. Of the Damned is notable because of the sheer number of variations in both text versions which have been discovered or collected, which originate from separate realities connected to our own by the ways. The majority of the books in the library exist in many incarnations, but Of the Damned represents a very high degree of variation for such a significant text. Refer to section 16 of Tennyson's Platonic Warfare for further dissection of some of the great scholarly conflicts over which variation of the text is prime. Currently, a major of the astrological scholars agree that the Lutheran manuscript is prime, but the Shah minority argues that the prime text is the Red Sea version, and Zenith, Brownic, and Leviathan manuscripts all have their proponents. Dear Mr. Owens, relaying this introduction to you upon request, I of course think that the Sun scholar's bias is plain, but in the interest of brevity, I will only point out the silliness of her referring to Terra Ulna as the prime reality. One would think that such a scholar would not indulge so freely in ethnocentric bias, but there we are. For God's sake, they don't even have a New York. Naturally, in other aspects, her illumination is still authoritative. I know you are still traveling, and I hope this message finds you well. Drop me a line on the network when you return to the library. Yours, Abigail Jackson, 2/24/2013, Association of Wanderers, 3rd Chapter, Violet Lantern Waystones, Los Angeles, California. Oh, I certainly would love to read the introductory notes of the Damned myself, but for now we shall move on to the next, as the book itself is not here. This appears to be written by Stygian Blue. Ode to the professor who wore a dinosaur costume to work. I wonder if I stayed out, after the clouds poured empty, would I grow crystal, sulphurous, and green on my skin if I held very, very still? Would my lungs turn to crackling noise, my eyes to quartz, my body a statue, fossilized? I once saw a magician perform a trick I'd seen before. I cried out that there was a mirror. This was no ESP. Clapped my hands and gleefully waited for my echoes to fade, for him to perform something new. Because now that the easy tricks were out of the way, he could improve. After all, why would he show us quaint parlor tricks when magic would do? His face was unreadable, and I didn't understand why he didn't show us more. Why that trickless magician was just standing in his star and patchwork robe, audienceless, staring at a kid who thought they knew the world. There's a copper taste when I leave the bath. I dunk my head, fill my sinuses with soap. I think if I stayed there, I'd grow, like quartz in seawater. Or maybe my skin would degrade, fleck away in bloodless strips, the tonguing of whale skin by a remnant sea. Maybe there's nothing to be said about the music of the world, but why not? Send your first grade art to Paris and see what happens. Call it innocence in pastel and crayon, mixed media portraits. Memories blurred, laughter keeping on. Write a book and donate it to a library. Carve an avocado pit and sell it for free to a stranger at a garage sale. Plant morning glories in watering pan. Put those on the sidewalk. Erect a wet floor sign. At the bus stop, draw a puddle in chalk. My roommate says when they buy a house, they'll keep it up. without installing a waterfall. And I say, make that waterfall. Plant plain grasses, build a climbing gym in your living room. Construct a statue to an old god on your porch. Cover your bedroom plexiglass with rainbow prisms to dazzle the sun. There's a fine line between burning an hour and spending it hard cash for joy and weirdness. Who likes concrete blocks without a graffiti sunrise? There's an ivy-strewn whale skeleton hanging in a lecture hall. Tiger lilies on rooftops. Weird art on porch legs. Ferns on bookshelves. I think next time it rains, I'll go outside and feel the droplets on my face. Maybe I'll turn to gemstones. Maybe in the pantry, in the last winter's cocoa. And it'll be all the sweeter for remembering the snow. A nice, erratic little poem. But no more erratic than what appears to be the next work by Carlin Ivy. Breakup Poem. English ivy on the ashtray shelf, dying. The experts won't agree if she was underwatered or overwatered. They always tend to say overwatering is worse. Hypersedia. But there's no root rot that I can see. On average, the diagnosis is that I watered her just right. How else can the moon be on both sides of the earth? She's very quiet except when I press on the seaweed crisp of a leaf, click of a capsule, crumble on the carpet. I lost a ring that looks like a moon. It has filigree of the leaves between two trusses. Maybe it will come back to me. Will my vine be ready to, after she's learned what she needed to do, from the hidden half of the sky? Or was she beneath my feet always a snake with no tail, one head by the ashtray and one off the coast of St. Denis? And if you held a can of tomatoes to your ear in St. Denis, would you have heard me singing to the ashtray? I never knew I lived on a candy apple, but I guess I knew the skewer wouldn't go through, all the way through. Certainly a little bit erratic, that one, but not a terrible read. Next is another one of Stygian Blue's work, it appears. Hummingbirds. Hummingbirds, red and green and black, lie as gemstones, dead in the cold. Let me tell you a story. Winter breaks the sea on jagged rocks, while we drink away our summer's wine. The day grows and windmills spin, heavy, turning gold at noon. Dally not, take this sunshine. Reach, hold the night at bay before it slips away into the sea. Even now it flees, slips away to lathes memory, leaving smokestacks in its wake. But that was then. Let me tell you of now. Snow swirls, boundless and even, and I was called the man with no fortune. Look at me now, dancing, graceful, silent, on shoes with no blades. We skate where the summer grows long, on melted slush with water-numbed shoes, where winter has slipped inside. Let us return to then. A heavy heart beats gray and brackish brown in the chest of a corpse, on an operating table where machines beat their final resignation. Outside the sea, where the ice had gone, holds theater to fish dressed in morning gray, seeking death by sunlight. Let us consider the now. One cannot know of suffering until they have seen the sea, with glistening plastic sand, stiff crusted nets, bauble-choked fish, rolling in with the tide. When we walk the beach, you in your suit, me in my coat and bladeless shoes, and feel the plastic bloated fish bellies pop beneath our heels, will you cry? When we go into my home, past the foyer, past the aquarium tank, packed with endangered coral, the sea's fresh caught tuna, ready and cooked for dinner, will you weep? And then, avalanche lilies grow in the peaks, crimson gold platinum in the dawn, and a single hunter's boot comes down. Squelch go the roots. The day grows, the snow reflects, and in blinding sunlight, the pines crackle with fire, born from careless smoke. Now. Ah, the wildflowers. But what of the fish? And the nets? And the 100-bottom trawlers? Dragging dolphins to the table, disguised as tuna. Will we weep when they are drowned? Tears cast no shadows in water, but the efforts redeems even the darkest of hearts. There is nothing to do, you know. You bang on the table, curse the ship, damn the hunters, but as permafrost turns to slush, hummingbirds freeze in the tropics, lilies brown and rot in the heights. Which will you choose for your sorrow? There is too much to despair. Do not cry for the world, weep for yourself. No, selfish, with tuna on the table, and dug up lilies dying in pots, that you do not care. Finally, tomorrow. The damage is done, broken glass rests, edges dulled by a ceaseless tide. Those dead yet slumber and skirt Stygian blues, seek greater depths. In the waves the ice floes reform, and glaciers creep like cats, and heavy their fur with slush. These are better days, and soon even hummingbirds will return. For alpine flowers crushed today are bulbs, who suffer today's indignities for spring. And with that rather wonderful poem by Stygian Blue, you pick up another book. It appears to be a collection of works, as it more appears to be a loose leaf collection of papers that were stapled together. It appears to be written, or rather composed, by RJB_R. Elrichian Almanac. These scraps of literature have been donated by my good friend Dr. Taylor and his associates at the Red Acting Troupe. They encompass the only known remains of a Dear Slowjump's novel, Almanac of the Imperium Lands and Its Neighbors. Although primarily focusing on the Imperium Confederate Empire, it has several chapters focused on the Kingdom of Elric. These fragments are the only known reproduction. The Kingdom of Elric, Almanac and the Kingdom of Elric is a strange land with borders, laws, and politics unlike any other. Illegible. An absolute monarchy, but it has political parties. The monarch rules with an iron fist, but he doesn't maintain a standing army, instead relying on the militia system. Although it appears as a weak union of provinces, the strong political might of the crown and the weak local governments, in addition to the lack of will for the Tibia province is the northernmost portion of the land which borders our own empire. Illegible. Other than them, not a desirable place to inhabit. Illegible. very few human residents, and even fewer friendly swamp illegible, which obviously should never stay overnight, lest you lose some vital organs. Historically, the raccoon mystics have arisen in rebellion, their dark, cheering tongues nearly spelling doom of the king's own illegible. In these years, the Tebia independence movement has been abandoned, only used by illegible, which nobody takes seriously. Fifth Elrichian Nationalist Party, also known as the often banned always Deadlock Party. Suva has had a historical rivalry with Elric for influence in the illegible, as well as the Fief of Dawn. Several wars between the two nations have been fought through the centuries, including the War of Alphonse's Yard over a property of dispute, and the War of Suvian Succession, when his healthy green Hamron III declared war to prevent the ascension of an eggplant. Oh, no, no, please never ever do that. You will be doubly axed in the illegible. The prompt method of cooking and eating and open deaths. This fragment was translated from Old Italian. Apologies for the roughness of the translation, but it is a very primitive language. Hello, hungry travelers. We are of the very happy persuasion to view your purchase of this guide, the Oltelian's Man's Guide to the Slayment and Self-Nourishment by using oaken written tome anchors. Illegible. Steps to follow with us will be a very easy to follow if you follow them by going through each step and following the directions until all of the directions have been followed, and then you have done it. Abering nation of Revelo is known for having unstable government. Illegible. A member of our glorious confederacy, it succeeded to become an independent kingdom. After the goat cheese uprising of 903, it became a Rupelbite. It is considered an enemy of the Confederate Empire. Illegible. Alliance with Elrich and Grandia, which has allowed for its survival during the First, Second, Ninth, and 27th Wars of Imperium Unification. Currently, acting president is Frederick Powell, crossed out, assassinated. Colin Brapier, crossed out, also assassinated. Dmitry Powell, crossed out, accidentally self-assassinated. The current king of Elch is Alexander Jaros IV, who succeeded Bream III last Julingst Day. Currently, his policies have consisted of expanded fertilization for all plants within the capital of Elra, and using his mystical royal mandate to create air for all property-owning citizens. Hats! And with that, we have come to the end of our readings for today. I'm sure you have places to be, and I have places to sleep. So, thank you very much for coming, and next time, there's a good chance we have a special appearance in another special episode like we had last time. This time, with Stygian Blue.